is no innovation without diversification. I mean, there's not. Experience, male, female. I mean, if nothing else, your life experiences are what you draw from when you innovate, right?
Yep.
So the fact that in today's world we're being told to not use words like diversity is, in my opinion, I mean, almost terrifying, because I am all about innovation.
Welcome back to the Badass Leaders Podcast. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with my friend, an extraordinary leader in healthcare innovation and business strategy, Sherry. As the Senior Vice President of Veranex, Preclinical Services in North America, Sherry has played a pivotal role in commercializing groundbreaking medical technologies. With a strong background in strategy, innovation, and public-private partnerships, Sherry is a visionary who knows how to turn ideas into sustainable success. We're excited to dive into her journey, insights on leadership, and the future of medical technology. Okay, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. We are thrilled to have you here and enjoy growing with you. So first off, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to learn and grow with us. Secondly, before you forget, please click that subscribe button to ensure you stay connected to the Badass Leaders community and you help us grow the community by subscribing. If you leave a comment, I'll make sure to go in and personally respond to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. So, are you ready? Let's do it. So join me, Angela Gill Nelms, on today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast, where I'm joined each week by industry experts for intimate and eye-opening discussions about the challenges and joys facing the leaders of today. Listen in and get ready to scale your company, grow your brand, and unlock your full badass potential. Welcome to AGN Studios.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and a little nervous to be interviewed by the great Angela.
Oh, well, yeah, a little excited instead of nervous, because you're amazing. And we have, you know what I was thinking about is I actually can't remember how we got introduced. So maybe you remember that, because we've been friends for many years.
Many years.
My daughter plays Pokemon with you.
Yes, Pokemon Go. She does. I love her. She's adorable. I think it was at Florence.
Yeah, maybe.
It was. Yeah. I mean, because I was in Synergy at the time.
Yes.
And I knew what you guys were doing. It was really interested. You know, I have a health IT background. Mm-hmm. And we met then. And then we just stayed in touch and we became great friends. And
life is amazing.
Yeah.
And I get to be very fortunate to interview you today. So why don't we tell the guests who you are and why you're here today?
Sherry Farrugia. I'm a senior vice president at Veranex, which is a company focused on medical device commercialization. We are a private equity-backed company by Summit Capital. I have spent my entire life in healthcare for more years than I care to tell the audience.
Well, so it was like just 10 years, maybe. That's what we'll say. Mm-hmm. So speaking of which, going back to, I was so enthralled with that. I was like, oh, where do I want to start? There were so many things we could start with. But why don't we, first at the AGN group, we're really passionate about understanding humans as humans. Mm-hmm. So why don't we roll back the script just a little bit and tell us about who you are as a human being.
Oh, gosh. Well, I was actually raised in a small town in LA, Lower Alabama.
I was about to say, I didn't know you were from California. I fell for it.
I'm not from California, but I love to tell cab drivers in New York that. And I was the youngest of three, first in my family to graduate from college, first generation. Went to Auburn University, got a degree in chemistry with a double minor in physics, and that's the rest. That's the early story, right? There's a lot. There's a lot to tell after that, but.
And your hobbies are?
My hobbies, is sitting on a bar stool with a glass of wine, watching your husband cook a hobby?
Absolutely. I think it can be.
I've perfected that.
Okay.
Other than that, I love to garden. I love to read. And, at the point that I am in my life, I just love to spend time with my family.
Yeah. Yeah. I can resonate with, I mentioned earlier my daughter is moving back from Arizona here.
It's so exciting.
And all I'm thinking are all the things that we can do together because she's always been my little sidekick. So,
well, and my entire life, I have always thought I have to be busy, busy, moving constantly,
Absolutely,
right? And, there's joy in finally getting to the point in your life where you're like, you know what? It's okay to just sit and do nothing for a little bit. And that's where I am.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, well, given the fact that both of us are spending our careers in advancing medical technology and innovation, which we both are super passionate about, and we also are both women, why don't we start with women in STEM and leadership? So the official question is, as a Woman of the Year and the Technology Award recipient, congratulations.
Thank you.
What unique challenges have you faced as a female leader in STEM?
Oh my gosh, that's an entire podcast. I'm going to tell you a story.
Love it.
So when, and by the way, I love Georgia Tech. I think everyone knows that. I've got, 2 family alumni, one that soon will be. So just know, even though this happened at Georgia Tech, I love Georgia Tech. When I first started at Georgia Tech, they did kind of like a little reception for me. Okay. And there were a lot of people there. They asked me to introduce myself. I introduced myself, very similar to what I just did here. And someone came up to me afterwards, a male, and said, "Oh, a degree in chemistry. I thought you had one of those fake degrees." I was like, "Well, I don't understand what a fake degree is."
What is a fake degree?
An MBA, apparently.
Oh.
And I asked him, I said, and by the way, he became one of my best friends. But I asked him, I said, "Did you think that because I'm a woman? Do you think that women just go into business?" Now, know that Georgia Tech graduates more female engineers, than any other engineering institution. And so I think there's this unconscious bias that women have worked really hard to overcome.
Yes.
I think that probably every woman would tell you they've gone through periods of not being taken seriously.
Yep.
There are plenty of examples of that. There's been plenty of examples of sitting in the room, giving a suggestion, here's an idea, being ignored, and then a male says it 5 minutes later.
And it's a great idea.
Oh my gosh, that's the best idea. But, there's ways to overcome that. And instead of getting mad and angry and jaded, you just continue to move forward. And I'm at a point now to where if that happens, I will say, "Excuse me, I said that 5 minutes ago. Is there a reason why it wasn't a good idea 5 minutes ago, but it's a good idea now?"
I love it.
Right? And I think part of that, and you have a daughter, part of that is what message are we sending to the future generation of women if we don't do that?
Absolutely.
And I made a decision, gosh, probably 10, 15 years ago, that when I'm invited to speak, when I'm invited to moderate, when I'm invited to sit on a panel, the first thing I do is I go and look at the event. And I see how many male-dominated panels, healthcare, mind you,
right,
full of women, male-dominated panels, male-dominated keynotes, and then I make the decision whether I'm going to support that or not. And I'm very clear with the person who invited me as to why I chose not to support.
I love this. I love this. I'm thinking about, and everyone knows that I love Georgia Tech. I bleed Georgia Tech.
Absolutely.
But I will tell you, I have a similar story in that I have been very blessed to have received 2 engineering awards from Georgia Tech.
Congratulations. Well deserved and earned.
And, the first was a young alumni, outstanding young alumni. The second was a distinguished alumni. And when they have annual, events to celebrate, and on multiple years I would take my ex-husband and other alumni would come up and shake his hand and ask what year he graduated, completely ignoring me. And I'm like, am I not here? Am I invisible? It became a really big joke because I, like you, am very confident and comfortable in my skin. But it definitely has allowed me to become a better leader of both men and women.
Yes.
Because I can, in the same instance, when I'm in a room, typically I see where another female has said something and I see this happen. And I get to be the one to speak up and say, wait, she just said that. Like, I love it, and to amplify her and support her and also help coach the men, because I think a very healthy leadership team brings in the best of all of us.
100%. I mean, I was hoping we'd talk a little bit about this, about diversity and innovation.
Yes.
There is no innovation without diversification. I mean, there's not. Experience, male, female. I mean, if nothing else, your life experiences are what you draw from when you innovate, right? Yep. So the fact that in today's world we're being told to not use words like diversity is, in my opinion, I mean, almost terrifying, because I am all about innovation. And I think about every team that I've ever had, and I'll tell you, remember when Steve Cross was the executive vice president of Georgia Tech?
Yes.
This was the one thing he preached was diversify, diversify, diversify. If everyone in the room looks like you, Sherry, sounds like you, Sherry, has your life experiences, Sherry, you will never find a solution.
Love, absolutely, spot on.
And it has stuck with me for years.
I go back to my days. I went back to school as a 29-year-old single mom with a special needs daughter, because that's what people do.
Yeah.
And for my capstone senior design project, mine was the very first ever interdisciplinary senior design.
Really?
Yes. And the reason is because I knew what I wanted to develop. I wanted to develop a fully functioning closed loop hydrocephalus shunt that actually had pressure sensors and was monitoring more than just by symptoms. And
life experience.
Yes, life experience. And I went to Paul Bankesser and said, hey, I don't want 4 to 5 biomedical engineers who had taken the same classes that I've taken. I want an electrical engineer, a mechanical engineer, computer science, and 2 BMEs. And he said to me, well, if you can convince those departments to do it, you can do it. And so, of course, I convinced those departments. We had to do 3 presentations, 3 papers. And the funny thing is that when we did our final presentation to the BME team, several of the other teams were mad. They were like, that's not fair. She got to have that. And he said, you know what? She asked. And when I was interviewing for jobs, graduating out of tech, I interviewed for 3 jobs. I got all 3 job offers. The minute I told them I had built a diverse team that had several cultures in it and engineers from these different disciplines, it was like mic drop. Hire her right now, because she knows how to collaborate. And
Absolutely.
I think the diversity part is learning how to collaborate with people who think differently and bringing the best out of each other.
Yes. And so it is the reason that public-private partnerships are so important.
Let's talk more. Let's talk more. That was on my list of questions. Let's go for it.
It is. It's because you bring that diversity, and you bring different stakeholders in, and you bring different life experiences, and you also bring very different personalities. Clinicians by nature, they're not engineers. Now, for my surgeon friends out there, I see you, okay? I see you. I know you're engineers at heart. But it really is what makes public-private partnerships so strong. And, with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and Georgia Tech, we really saw that, right? And I tell the story, and it's one about empathy. And I believe that empathy is really the foundation of innovation. You have to really...
I'm dying to hear more.
Okay. So imagine bringing a group of clinicians and engineers together. And what do clinicians do? Clinicians have problems, right? And they don't need answers. They need solutions. Right? And so walking into a lab at Georgia Tech, a clinician slides a piece of paper across the table, build me this. Now, as an engineer, how might you react? I don't build things. I solve problems.
Exactly.
Oh, well, I'm a failure at my job. That's the first thing I thought was great. And, driving home that night, at the time I lived in Gwinnett County, so I actually had to drive. I thought, that was a terrible failure. First time I tried to put these groups together. And then that's when it dawned on me, it's because the engineers have never spent time in an ICU at Children's.
Yes, exactly.
And also, we were in a conference room. The clinicians had probably never been in a lab, a real lab, an engineering lab at Georgia Tech. Empathy. So I put together a visit to ICU. You can imagine a group of engineers walking into ICU at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and they're in shock.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they've never seen anything like that. They immediately start to think about all the problems that they can solve. The clinicians walking into, a lab at Georgia Tech and going, wow, I guess you don't just tinker all day.
Right.
And that's the beauty. That's really the beauty of diversifying your team.
I love the comment about solving problems because I strongly believe that I of course have an engineering bias. I'm an engineer. And when I mentor and I talk to them, I'm like, stop worrying about what your first job is going to be. If you know how to solve problems and how to collaborate together to solve problems, then you can do anything. You can pivot. I've shown you can pivot.
I have too.
Right? We both pivoted. And I think that the collaboration between the clinician and the engineer is also sometimes, as ourselves, if we're a clinician, we may think we know the solution to the problem and draw it out perfectly.
You may know the answer.
Exactly.
But not the solution.
There you go. There you go. And so challenging teams to do customer, your 5 whys, digging in. Well, why is this a problem? Well, why is that? Well, why? Well, and getting to the root, then that's where innovation is.
100%. And, and it's also, and I guess this kind of goes back to, and we talked a little bit earlier about the whole conflict resolution.
Yeah, I wanted to dig into that next.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be an issue when you innovate and you diversify your team, right? Because, like you said, you have different cultures, you have different life experiences, you have different educations, and
different levels of confidence in
different
your own
levels
abilities.
Right. And you know what? You may have 5 engineers in the room and them all have a different idea of how to solve the problem.
Yes.
So you have, it's like the meta conflict, right?
Yeah.
It's not just the engineers and the clinicians conflicting. It's, your own team, your own individual group of engineers who are in conflict. And I really struggled with that initially with this partnership. But what I call it, everyone talks about what was your aha moment. It wasn't an aha moment. It was what I've kind of coined the rah-rah moment, that the first is that you have to recognize that the cultures are very different, that we are different, that we have different life experiences, and that, in this particular situation, that the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, culture is very different than, a Georgia Tech or really any engineering school culture. 1 is not 0. You don't want to make mistakes. You do everything you can to prevent making a mistake in a clinical environment. But engineers,
I want them to make mistakes.
Right.
That's how they learn and grow.
Exactly. You fail fast.
Exactly.
You innovate. You start over. You have an answer. Let's find the right solution. I mean, that's what we do. And so you have to first just recognize and then get to a point of accepting that the cultures are different, but they're different for really good reasons. It's not, well, I just want to be different than you. It's because you don't want to cause harm to in a clinical setting. And then when you do that, you really get to the point to where you can, you get to respect, you get to, and then finally, when you clear that final hurdle, you get to the point of acceleration. it takes time, and then you can accelerate innovation.
So the faster you fail on the front end,
Yes.
you want to find that big failure experiment,
Yes.
right? Like, what is the experiment that's going to be pass or fail at this point? Get to there as quickly as you can. And then when you get to a pass, well, then light up the engine fuel and dig in to the explosion of what you can do.
And it was amazing how, quickly we were able to innovate because of that. And, and having that common goal of why are we here? Goes back to the whys. Well, we're here to make the difference in the life of at least one child.
Right.
And staying focused on that goal.
Yeah, I love this. Okay, conflict resolution. The listeners know I love conflict resolution. I am on my own personal mission to make the word conflict no longer a bad word or
It's not a bad word.
It's not. But so many people, they hear the word conflict and their physical body reaction is like knots in their stomach. They start to sweat. Their heart rate increases.
Yep.
They start to get a little bit of brain fog because they're not really sure what path to go. You can almost see them backing up in a room in your head when you see conflict.
They shut down.
They completely shut down. And you and I have similar thoughts on conflict. So, and I know you have a story about it. So tell me what your thoughts are on conflict resolution.
Well, I think it starts with common ground. And I have so many stories on conflict. You cannot run a public-private partnership without stories on conflict resolution. But there was this one particular time, and it was extremely important that we get this done. And I'm not going to divulge what it was, but it had the potential to be life-saving. Okay, so there was staying focused on the goal, but there were not only human conflicts, there were legal conflicts. And there were legal conflicts on both sides, and they were different. Georgia Tech had their state agency. The legal conflicts there are very different than if you are Children's Healthcare of Atlanta or any hospital, right?
Yep.
And we were on a clock. We had to, I'm hearing from physicians, we've got to get this done. And it was a tremendous amount of negotiation. And every time, here I go, hitting the mic again. I see you, Eric. It was every time we would deviate, I would bring us back to why we're doing this. Even to the point to where, it was, let's talk. Not pointing the finger at anyone, right? But as a group, can we live with ourselves if we don't do this? If we don't get this done, can we live with ourselves? And if the answer is no, then by God, let's get it done, right? And
I love one thing really quick I want to highlight is you did an excellent job in this story, in the real life example, right, of getting everyone on the same page, on the joint mission. You pulled everyone back and said, whoa, wait, let's pause for a minute. What is our joint mission? Is that what success looks like this for all of us, right? Okay, now let's dig in again.
Yeah, I think that's the key. And I will tell you, I was very clear. If you are not on board with this, then find somebody who is. Because it's the only way we're going to get it done. And we did get it done.
I was about to say, spoiler alert.
Oh my gosh.
You nailed it.
Oh yeah, we got it done. It almost killed me, but we got it done. And I was driving home after, a huge success with the impact on a child. And Donna Highland called me, and she said, "Oh, I've talked to the physicians. They said this would have never happened without you." 9 times, Eric. And I said, "Well, I don't know if whether that's exactly true, but I did, really work to keep everyone focused. It was a team effort." And she said something like, "Well, what's next for you, Sherry?" And I said, "What's next for me is I'm going to go to DC and I'm going to work on world peace," and kind of chuckled. And she said, "Well, tell them to call me for a reference."
I love it.
It felt like that many times.
DC could use someone working on world
Maybe,
peace right about
perhaps.
now.
I'm available.
Okay. Well, let's speak a little bit about another hot topic that I love, and it's the difference between managers and leaders, because I want to also dig into your personal leadership style.
Okay.
And so let's kick off from your perspective. What do you believe the difference between a manager and a true leader is?
Well, for me, a leader is someone who listens and who serves. And a manager, in one word, is just someone who dictates. And it starts, again, for me personally, it starts with trust. But you can't get there with trust without transparency. And when I moved from being the COO of the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Pediatric Technology Center over to being the CEO of GCMI, it was a tough time, and we were in the middle of COVID. I
actually didn't remember that was in the middle of COVID. I couldn't remember how long you were at GCMI. And tell the listeners what GCMI was.
The Global Center for Medical Innovation. And so I am meeting with the team. Now, I did know many members of the team, Angela, but a lot of them I did not. And I am meeting with them and introducing myself for the first time virtually on Teams. It was a nightmare. And the commitment that I made to them was that I would be transparent and that I would share successes, but I would also share failures with them. And it took months to gain trust, of course, a new leader coming in.
How do you know when you've gained trust? How does a leader know when they've gained trust?
I knew when my door became a revolving door.
Love it. Love it. We've talked some in the episode with Drew Harden. He actually, at Blue Compass, their offices have no doors at all. And I love that because we've both worked with people who say, my door is an open door, and it's never open. And even if it were open, your response when someone comes in with an opportunity for growth is to basically slam the door in their face. Not literally, but maybe literally, but
so my office, I do have a door, but I also have a huge a window.
Right.
Looking like everybody walks by and they're constantly waving, even if my door is closed. I also I like to be in the office. I want to be available to the team at all times. However, if I have a day that is nothing but calls and Teams meeting, I don't go into the office because my door is closed. I hate that. I do not want to close my door. I am there to be a resource. I am there to help. I am there to walk around I constantly am walking to see how I can support, how can I help. I'm not above doing anything. And I don't want to be, again, that leader who is in her office with the door shut in front of a computer. If I'm going to do that, then I'll work from home that day.
Yeah.
So I work really hard to schedule as much as I can, like all of those Teams meeting, those calls on the same day.
Smart. I like that. So I want to talk a little bit why don't we talk about the transition of moving from GCMI over to Veranex. So talk about what you do now at Veranex and how maybe what are some lessons you maybe learned in that journey of the transition between the two?
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. This is water, folks. Water. Okay, just so you know. I'm doing the same job, in the same chair, in the same office, in the same building. GCMI, the Global Center for Medical Innovation, was an affiliate of Georgia Tech. We were at a point where 85 to 90% of our business, of our revenue, was industry. Affiliates of the University System of Georgia exist to serve the institution. We were no longer just doing that.
Right.
So it was the right time. It was also the right thing to do for Atlanta. It was the right thing to do for the state of Georgia so that we could better serve this amazing life science ecosystem.
Our ecosystem is unbelievable. I mean,
it's just crazy
what
we've done in 10, 15 years. Unbelievable.
So all VCs, if you're not already here, and PE companies and all of that, seriously, the amount of I want to say one thing really quick. So I am a biomedical engineer.
Yes.
And when I graduated, I thought one day I'm going to go to Silicon Valley. Why? Because that's where all biomedical engineers go.
That's what we're told.
Yeah, exactly. And we're told that all advanced technology comes from there, and that's where the best of the best are, and all of these types of things, right? And yet I was a single mom with a 5-year-old. I needed to make steady income, and Medtronic was an amazing choice for me, and so that's what I did.
Sure.
Fast forward, my daughter graduated high school, and so I got an opportunity to go run as COO a biopharmaceutical company in Silicon Valley. And this is what I tell people. It's kind of, my experience was, it's kind of like if you're a country music singer, you think you need to go to Nashville to do music, and then you get there, and you suddenly realize, I can do country music anywhere. Same thing. I got out there, and really what I realized is that, yes, the ecosystem of Silicon Valley has old bones to it and all of this, but the grit, the determination, the passion, the innovation, the ability to pivot on a dime that Atlanta has, I have yet to see another city that has that, not to mention our cost of living is, like a third or a quarter.
And the one thing that you did mention that I think really differentiates us
What?
is our community.
Oh,
The community,
yes.
the spirit of community. I don't even mean Georgia Tech, Emory, CDC, Mercer, Georgia State. I hope I didn't UGA. I hope I didn't leave anyone out.
Kennesaw,
right? I mean, it's that we come together. It's what are you working on? How can I help you?
How can we collaborate?
How can we collaborate? And that's what I get when I do bring people in. They're like, this is an amazing community. You pick up the phone. Someone wants to help you.
Yes.
They don't say,
not for an agenda.
No.
Not for equity in your company or for all these other reasons.
No, it's just, it's a great place to be. It really is. So it was the right thing to do. Okay. We're right next to, we're still in the same building, which, I look at Science. I'm right there at Science Square, Portal Innovations. Those folks are incredible.
Yep.
But it was different. I was no longer a Georgia Tech employee. None of us were.
Right.
And, we are now working for, a PE-backed company. And I had, I've been involved.
Which for listeners who don't know, it's private equity.
Private equity, thank you. I had worked for venture capitalist-backed companies before. I mean, my first company that I founded was a venture capitalist-backed company. And this is very different. Transitioning from being a, state employee in an engineering institution,
Yes.
nonprofit, to a for-profit. I'd worked in for-profits. The majority of the employees had not. And so it was a big transition, and I felt it for the employees.
Right.
For me, it wasn't as big of a transition. I thought I knew we were getting into. I mean, it is different, right?
Right.
It's been the best thing that's ever happened to us. But I felt it. I knew the employees were going to lose some benefits, but they were going to gain others, and I knew that transition was going to take longer.
Yeah.
It was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was legally. There were times we thought it was impossible, but what I learned is that, life goes on.
Yes.
I mean, life, whether you're ready for it or not, so you may as well be ready because it isn't going to wait on you. Change is a very powerful thing, and it's what you make of it. I can tell you, the only change I like is change that I want to make.
And then later we look back on something and we forget that we didn't want to make that change because now we like the change.
Right. And I laugh about the fact that I'm very self-aware. I know. Okay, I'm a control freak. If I don't want to make the change, I don't want to make it. But it was the best thing for all of us, and it was the best thing for the community. So, I mean, those are really the things that I've learned is things that you already know that you've been through before. So I would say it was more a reminder than
Yes.
anything
Yes.
that you make the best of the situation. You focus on the positives, that whether you like it or not, life goes on. So embrace the change. And if you embrace it, some incredible things can come out of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about building startups. So you have been, and I hope this number is right, it could be even more than this. You've been instrumental in bringing over 20 medical devices to market.
More than that, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. What trends excite you the most in the future of medical technology?
Well, the answer that I suspect most people would give is AI. Okay. Artificial intelligence. And of course, long term, I can tell you AI is going to revolutionize healthcare.
Yep.
100%. Okay. For me, at the moment, and really for the near term, I am super excited about at-home diagnostics.
Oh, I love this. I was just reading. I'm lecturing a class this fall at Emory in their new Masters of Bioinnovation and Development for Advanced Therapeutics. And so I'm reading my own textbook that we chose. And this came up, and we've had in Biolocity, we've had several teams looking at this. And I've been saying the ability for you to send someone something in the mail and it be so user-friendly, error-proof, that they can do it in the comfort of their home, the privacy of their home, not have to take time off of work, not have to travel in traffic, pay to park, put your kids somewhere, all of these other things, and send it in a calm environment versus going into a doctor's office and sitting and waiting and that person's coughing. Why are they not, all these things.
Oh,
wow.
100%. I mean, if you think about even just the finances of it, right? I mean, the financial impact, most of us have insurance. It costs money, okay?
Right.
And the efficiency. So both from a financial perspective and from an efficiency perspective. And so often, what happens? We wait until we are super sick to go to the doctor.
Yep.
And that usually results in, you're missing work. You're missing out on life. You may have to be hospitalized. The cost to
treat
the healthcare system is astronomical. Whereas if we could do at-home diagnostics, even just think about how the at-home flu test has changed things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have the flu. You call the doctor, call me in the antiviral. Wow. It just even something simple like that, the impact that it's had. So I'm super excited about at-home diagnostics and really the advances that we're making right here in Atlanta in that market.
Yeah, when you think about healthcare utilization, and when I'm working and mentoring teams, a lot of the healthcare utilization factors are the factors that they forget are huge additives to the value add and the value chain of what they're actually building. Just like, wait, you can reduce the cost of the amount of time waiting in a patient room so the doctor can see another patient who's at a higher level. You can catch something much sooner so that, as you mentioned, your cascade effect is cut in half, third, quarter, all of these things. I love that.
Well, it also increases access, which is something I'm very passionate about. You're in a rural community, you're a mom, you're a single mom, you're hourly worker. You can't afford to take off and sit in a doctor's office with your child.
Exactly.
Just the impacts are incredible.
Yeah, I love this. Okay, so how do you approach the commercialization of healthcare innovations while ensuring they still stay patient-centered?
Well, you have to engage your stakeholders. I mean,
Let's talk more. Listen to the stakeholder. I think a lot of when I talk with teams and I say, who did you do for your customer discovery? They will say, I talked to these 3 doctors at Emory, and they're located at Emory. And I'm like, okay, first off, I need you to get out of the Southeast.
Diversify.
Exactly.
I mean, it comes back to, diversifying.
Get to the West Coast, get to some community center healthcare, and also get to the patient. So
here's the thing. Here's the one thing I learned in pediatrics. The stakeholder is not just the patient. It's the parents. It's the siblings. It's the extended family. It's the community. When you do a heart transplant on a child, depending on the socioeconomics, it's the community that rallies around that
Yes.
child, right? So it's understanding who your stakeholders are and also understanding that the way that we do things here in Atlanta, Georgia is very different than the way we might do things in Evergreen, Alabama.
Exactly. And here's a little hint for you entrepreneurs out there. If you really want to get a VC company to back you when you're doing your pitch and you show, I have customer discovery from these 5 different pockets of the healthcare community, just talking just on the doctor's end, right? And I also have pockets from, let's just say pediatrics, from parents that talk about the impact of daily injections to their kid and how this can transform. When you're able to succinctly, in one slide, show all that information, I as a VC, I'm like, okay, tell me more. Now, if you walk in and you say, okay, well, we have these 4 doctors listed and they're all the same healthcare center and they all say this is a problem, then I, as a VC, am going to say, well, I wonder if it's really a problem or just a problem at that particular location.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. The first company that I was a co-founder in, it was based upon, it was for at-home care. Okay. So it was a data collection tool for home care, but it was focused on both financial and clinical outcomes. Now, this was in the late 80s, early 90s, folks. So long before people were talking about that. But my point in all of this was the majority of the data that we were collecting was not, we collected clinical data, but it was socioeconomic data. And looking at how the socioeconomics, and it could be the difference again. You could both have engineering degrees, but you live in Atlanta versus, Montgomery, Alabama, let's say. Again, your life experiences are different.
Right.
You have the potential for your clinical outcomes to be very different, not based upon your diagnosis, but based upon your setting.
Yes.
So again, it goes back to having, a diverse population in your stakeholder engagement and your customer discovery.
I cannot preach that. And I am a big fan of getting in a room with big dry erase boards and throwing ideas on the wall,
Absolutely.
throwing the names on the wall. Don't do all of this stuff in your head. Do this. And then also when you're bringing in your team members that are diverse because you've created a well-rounded team that's going to set you up for success, they are then going to look at all of these names on the wall and say, oh, wait, we're forgetting this or we're forgetting this. And sometimes I love to ask customer discovery, what other types of customers do you think I should talk to that I haven't already talked to?
100%. And I think I'm going to go back to your whiteboard statement and your team, because what you just demonstrated was the one thing that I believe is imperative in innovation as well. And that is creating a fear-free environment.
Yes.
You will never innovate if you can have a diverse group around the table, but if they're afraid to speak up.
Yep. I love the idea of saying to the team, and I learned this in problem-based learning at Georgia Tech when we had those rooms that were all, and I love saying to teams, I don't care how crazy an idea is. We're throwing them all up on the wall. Maybe I'll give awards for the craziest idea, because it uses a different part of your brain as well and opens up and expands what you can actually, and I think what you can actually accomplish and develop. And also thinking about becoming innovative, when you don't do that, oftentimes teams end up navigating towards Me Too devices and things that look just like something else. And then you find out really quick when you do the patent search, well, there's too much prior art. We're not doing this anyway. But so you're not really solving a new problem. You may be tweaking something. But if you're throwing out these crazy wild ideas and you're getting it from a diverse group and everyone's speaking up and saying it, that's when you're really going to be able to make a huge impact.
100%.
So let's talk about, you talked a little bit about private and public. And I know in my current role, since I'm running Biolocity and it's split between Georgia Tech and Emory, which is a private university and a public university, I have opportunities to expand my conflict resolution and relationship building skills using that. But the thing that I really love is that there a lot of value add can happen. And you talked a little bit about this, but can you talk about how private and public institutions or collaborations can improve? Like, how can they grow in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about, they're imperative.
Right.
It's imperative because you have, you have a group with very different backgrounds and experiences coming together to innovate. It takes someone who is willing to spend the time and the effort to actually run the partnership. And it is the most overlooked thing, Angela. I don't understand it. And I'm not going to name any names here, but I was asked by a hospital outside of the state of Georgia if I could, come in and talk to them. They were trying to pull together a public-private hospital with a hospital and a university. And I, opened up, the book, talked to them about what I'd done, made even some slides for them, gave them lessons learned, all the things that I did wrong that I learned. And then I also said, and here are the things that I think are imperative in order for it to be successful. So they didn't do anything that I told them that they should do, by the way. Totally ignored me. Came back a year later, and I'm like, look, you got to figure this out on your own at this point. But anyway, I say all that to say that having that individual like yourself, who's sitting there in the middle, who's willing to compromise, who's willing to understand both sides, who's willing to say, been in the room, done this. Is this the right thing for Georgia Tech? Probably not. Is this the right thing for Emory? Doesn't look like it. Is it the right thing for the partnership? Yes.
Right.
And you're not going to have someone, and I'll tell you, it's part of the reason that even when I was a Georgia Tech employee that, Georgia Tech's, that children supported my salary so that I truly could sit in the middle.
Yes.
And I know at Biolocity, that's a similar.
Yep. Emory supports my
That's right.
My salary.
It's a similar setup. And that way you see both sides. So I think that is you'll look and they'll have all the other ingredients, but no one really focused on sitting in the middle with the partnership's best interest.
Going back to your comment about empathy, I think one of the things with Biolocity, I bleed Georgia Tech. I've spent my entire career focused and on multiple boards at Georgia Tech. And then when I was recruited for this position, and then my boss, Alyssa, sent me, she's like, okay, here, you can now officially go and apply. And it was an Emory link. And I was like, what? Because if you go to Biolocity on the website, it says biolocity@gottech.edu, right? And so I will tell you, I am so grateful that it was, and my office is at Emory. And I think that my point on this is that I would encourage people that are doing partnerships with like a private and a public, go and spend time sitting in the shoes of the other place.
I had an office at Children's.
Yeah.
I had an office at Georgia Tech as well. But yes, 100%. I would go and sit in the lobby at what we would call Scottish Rite. I've been here a long time, right? Right. At Scottish Rite and Eggleston. And for those of you who don't know, they merged years ago to make Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. I've just been
now
here
it's
a while.
Arthur
I've been
Blank.
here since 1982, so it's been a while. But it's and just literally just sit there and watch the parents come in with their children. Watch the parents come in with the other siblings, knowing they were going to visit a child, to keep me grounded.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would leave going, I can't give up. I've got to get this done.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the thing I love about now being on Emory's campus and being more new to the Emory people is they've so embraced me, and they're involving me in all of these meetings, and I'm seeing all of these things. And I think that we cannot underemphasize the value add of actually sitting in seats that are different than the one you're used to sitting in.
Yep.
And pausing when you're doing that and observing and shutting your mouth and looking around and meeting humans as humans and seeing, and then taking a step back and saying, wait, there are some really great things that we can utilize from this atmosphere and some really great things that we can utilize from this atmosphere. And then being a connector personality, like you said.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really why I absolutely love my job, is because every single day, if I open my mind every single day, I have the opportunity to learn.
Absolutely.
Every single day. I'm like, how can I? It's just so interesting. And to your point about, sitting with the individuals and the empathy, even today in the job that I have now, there are veterinarians, there's vet techs, there's surgical techs, there's animal care, there's program leadership. They all have a different perspective on how things should even be done in our own facility. So bringing them together, but watching them work and understanding why that perspective is maybe 180 from another member of the team really helps you understand their point of view and why it's important to them. And I think that too often it's back to people stay in their offices with the door shut. Get out of your office.
Exactly. And they think of this position as the word of the title instead of a human being who's doing the work, who's interacting with the environment on a day-to-day basis and with whatever it is they're working with. And that amount of knowledge that you have from that, you can't put that into a title and a name in a room. Like you really can't. Let's talk about growing businesses. So what's your advice for a young entrepreneur that has this great medical technology idea and they're looking to build a sustainable growth model within it from startup to long-term future? What are some key things when you think about building something for sustainability as a startup that you would recommend?
Well, I think the most common things you hear, so I'm going to start with those and I'm going to tell you what I think.
Love it. Let's do it.
Financial, make sure it's a financial model, that you've modeled it out, that it can be successful. What does your competitors look like? Strong governance, very focused on your vision. Don't deviate from your vision.
Don't whittle on this and this and this.
But there's no sustainability without your people, period. I mean, you cannot do it without a team of individuals who are aligned on the purpose. That is the number one thing. I've worked with more entrepreneurs in my career like you that think they can do it alone. Or maybe they have a couple people they hire and they're just going to tell them what to do. People.
I once had a board member of one of my previous companies. I was talking in a board meeting and this company had already had quite a bit of turnover. And I was new in a couple months in. And so one of the things I presented was ways to reduce turnover. And this board member was like, I don't care about turnover in companies that are less than a Series C. And I thought, are you kidding me? Like, that is the exact opposite of what I think from in leadership, because those core team members that are passionate, that are often not making market rates, and they're in it because they're really want to make an impact on these things. Those are the people that you want to keep, and you want to select the right people, get rid of the brilliant jerks, and select the people that are going to really grow together.
Well, and there's been a lot of research on this. The people who you don't want to leave are going to be the ones who leave. They have the opportunities. The people who you want to leave stay. So you have to. They don't leave, people. So, and I actually earlier in my career I actually did some research on this as well. And so, choose wisely, use your gut. Too often we ignore our instincts as leaders, as human beings, and we're so impressed by a resume
Yep.
that make sure they're a good fit for your culture.
And when you get someone who's amazing and comes in, empower them to actually do what you hired them to do.
Absolutely. I personally, I won't last a week at a job where I'm micromanaged.
Right. Ditto. Absolutely
I will tell you, I have to really balance, though, making sure that I give enough support, because I'm not a micromanager. I mean, I'm the kind of leader who says, hey, look, I'm here to support you. Let's talk this through, but you go do you, okay?
Right.
And sometimes you do need to step in and give more support,
yes.
right? And
you mean they can't read your head? They can't read your mind?
And so I've, through the years, I mean, I've learned that as well, is that just because you are providing support doesn't mean you're a micromanager.
Right. I love that. Okay, let's talk about in the work that we do, there are high risks in it. And so, I mean, innovation in and of itself is a high risk. Okay. So how do you balance risk and innovation when leading organizations in high stake industries?
Well, we've talked a little bit about this, already, is that you do have to create, an environment that is fear-free. But you have to couple that with, if we're going to fail, we have to fail fast.
There is, I want to say, I'm not sure if it's Simon Sinek who coined this, but someone coined this a different perspective than fail fast. And it was learn fast.
Love it.
And it is the mindset. And actually, have you heard the story about when Thomas Edison's laboratory burned down? And he looked at it and he said, oh, look, all of our mistakes are gone. We can start all over. Right? Having the mindset that every time something doesn't work, it's really not a failure. It's a learning opportunity, and you're growing off of it.
Well, I mean, absolutely. And I love that, because I always say, through failure are how we learn our biggest lessons.
Exactly.
100%. And it's just about not repeating them.
Yes.
And
which is the learning piece too.
It is the learning piece, because there's also, I think there's this almost this human drive to say, okay, I failed at that, so let me try it again to see if I won't fail the next time. And you're going to do the same thing and it's still going to fail. So you have to balance that as well, right? Is saying, okay, that didn't work. Let's pivot and see what will work.
I think too many organizations forget to do a retrospective analysis of what they just accomplished.
Oh, girl.
Right.
I mean, look, we struggle with that in my industry.
Because you think, okay, this didn't work. Okay, we're going to immediately pivot to this. And you need to move fast. Your runway is burning away. And so the idea to slow down, to move faster, it's really hard cognitively to absorb. And so to realize, okay, wait, if we why don't we just take a day or a couple of hours, and depending on what the thing is, and let's dig through the things and make sure we've captured all of our lessons learned, versus just going full steam ahead into the other.
Yeah. I mean, and so that, as a leader, that's also a challenge, because time is money.
Yes.
So you have to understand the value that by, I still say, stop, drop, roll, people. Because everyone understands that, right? They're like, is there a fire somewhere? It may as well be.
Right.
But we do have to stop and think about, it's the reason we do the postmortems in the hospital, right?
Yep.
Do the same thing with whether it's a study, whether it's, you're building something as an engineer, and really dissecting. I mean, that's the way I think about it, is we have to dissect to really understand it. It's what we do with anatomy, right? I mean, think about what you learned when you were in anatomy and physiology. You were in there, and the way that you learn, like, oh, wow, look at that muscle. Oh my God, that bone is so cool. You have to take it apart to put it back together.
Yes. And I think the other piece of it is teams often don't think about doing it when things are successful. And it's
Yes.
critical to do things when it's successful and to sit and say, okay, what did we do really well that we want to repeat? And what are some little things, maybe not so
Yes.
great, we won't repeat in the future?
Absolutely. That's a great point. And I think that sometimes we're just so excited and we have that you know,
high.
that high, that dopamine high.
Right.
And look at us, we did this. That you don't stop to say, hey, look, let's make this policy.
Yes.
You know, we have such a, you know, medical device commercialization is the compliance and the complexity is just unbelievable. So it's like, should we make this an SOP? You know, should we make this a standard operating procedure? You know, but let's at least talk about how we can weave this into our everyday.
Operationalize it.
Absolutely.
Yes. Operationalize excellence into
Yes.
your everyday life. Okay, so how do you personally stay ahead of industry trends and continuously innovate? I know with being super busy, it's really hard to do that.
It is. So I love to connect with people. And so I learn by having lunch with you, right? Having lunch with, you know, our community. I love to do that, or going out for, you know, a quick dinner. And that, what is that? That's meeting with thought leaders, right?
Yes.
So thought leadership is really how I consume knowledge, and it helps me retain it as well, because I can recall experiences, and most people can. So I remember our lunch, and I remember what we talked about, and so I try to be more intentional with that time. Where we talk about what's on the horizon, what's new, what are you doing, what have you seen, those types of things. I also love to go to conferences. Portal Innovation's a great resource.
Yep,
bringing
absolutely.
in some amazing talent. But so is Georgia Life Sciences, the Metro Chamber. There's so many in our community that I attend and I learn from. I read, but the type of reading I do is very different than earlier in my life, where I would consume a book a week. My eyes are old and tired.
You haven't converted to Audible yet?
Not quite. I'm like, can they make that, you know, that audio book, that audio smell like a book, and I can hear the pages turn. Until then,
I am sure some engineer can do this.
Please. But I dig into a lot of publications.
Yeah.
And that's the other way.
Yeah, I love just getting to know humans as humans.
Me too.
And so that whole the thing to me that's beautiful about it is that if I seek out a publication, I have that confirmation bias in just seeking out, depending on what I search by, right? And it's going to show me articles that almost affirm whatever it is I think. Okay, that's how the Google search engines work. Right. And however, when I meet with a whole bunch of different people, if I want to have a diverse mindset and I'm thoughtful about meeting with people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, from different experience levels, then I slowly chip away at that confirmation bias. Yep. Because it always shocks me. Someone will say something that is a complete pivot from what I even thought we were going to talk about. Absolutely. That takes us along a journey that is, once again, one of those experiences that you remember.
Yeah. It's the publication is a transaction.
Yes.
And I am really about building relationships for life.
Yep.
And I love that we can just really intertwine that into learning as well.
Yep. I love that. Okay, so we could talk for days. And is there anything you really hoped we would cover that we haven't covered yet?
I don't think so. This has been an incredible conversation. I think I told you earlier that, and for the audience, just so you know, I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to interview Angela at some point.
Absolutely.
Can't wait.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so the biggest requirement of this podcast, because I believe in motivational quotes so much, they've revolutionized my life. So what is your favorite motivational quote?
Good things may come to those who wait, but only what's left by those who hustle.
Oh my gosh, I just got chills. I've never heard that before.
Okay. It has been my quote since like the 80s. Okay. Here's what's so funny about it. It was attributed to Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
Now, today, in today's world, if you Google it, it's like maybe Abraham Lincoln, source unknown.
Right.
And so I was talking to my husband this morning. I knew you were going to ask this, and he knows what my quote is as well. And he said, "Do you really think that Abraham Lincoln said the word hustle?" I said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to find out when it was added to the dictionary." So this morning, I looked 1600s. So you know what, folks? Maybe Abraham Lincoln did say the word hustle.
That is amazing. And you know what? It was probably just as relevant in the 1600s as it is in 2025.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for absolutely bringing the badass to this podcast. I am very grateful.
This was so much fun. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here, Angela. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me for today's episode of the Badass Leaders Podcast. To hear more interviews with industry experts and learn how to grow your career and leadership potential, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. This podcast is a production of the AGN Group. To learn more about the AGN Group, visit our website at theagnGroup.com. There, you can discover more about our services, which include hosting workshops, management consulting, brand strategy, keynote speaking, and more. Follow us on all social media channels shown on the screen and displayed in the show notes. And until next week, be brave and be badass.